Hello everyone. In this short video, what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at the graph of the function f of x equals x squared here, and I'd like to use it to determine the domain, the range, what f of 3 is, and also to answer what x values correspond to a y value, y equals 4. So those are the four things we're going to find for this picture, for this graph, f of x equals x squared. So let's begin. We'll start with the domain. So whenever you're thinking about the domain of a function, what you really want to think about is what x values you can plug into your function, right? So this function is the function that just takes our x value and it squares it, or it multiplies it by itself, right? So squaring is just multiplying by itself. So we can take any real number and square it. There's nothing that stops us from doing that, right? We don't get anything undefined upon doing that. So there's no say like division by 0 in this problem, and there's no negatives under a square root or anything of that nature. So in this instance, the domain is just all real numbers. You can plug in anything in for x here. So we say that's all real numbers. So we denote that with a capital R. So yeah, this is basically any number that you can think of that we've come across so far. It's pretty much any number that you can think of. Except for complex numbers, but we haven't gotten to those yet. So again, just think of real numbers as any possible number, whether it's fractional, whether it's the number pi, whether it's the number 0, 1, 2, those are all real numbers, and pretty much anything you can imagine. So not to harp on that for too long. So now let's talk about the range. So for the range, we've got to look at the set of all y values that this function takes on, so that this graph touches. So if we're looking at this graph here, note one thing, and that's that at the very bottom right here, that's its lowest point. Its lowest point is at the origin, right? That's the same as the point 0, 0. So the lowest y value is 0. So what we can say is that the range is the set of all y's such that, this means such that, so it's the set of all y's for which, or such that, y is, okay, so we can see that y is always at least 0, because the lowest it can be is 0. And then also note that as you travel along either arm of the parabola, these arrows, what they indicate is that the function goes on forever. So it goes on forever up and to the left, and it goes on forever up and to the right. So there's nothing that's bounding the growth of this thing on either side of the parabola. So this thing's going to increase to infinity, essentially. So what we'll say is that this is the set of y values such that y is greater than or equal to 0, right? So the lowest it could be was 0. So on a number line, it would look like this for the range. Say we have a number line with our y's on them, and say 0 is here. So on a number line, it would look like this. Our solution set, or rather the range, would be this set right here, from 0 to up to infinity, right? So that would be the range in this picture, because it goes up forever. And that's what's key. So next, we'll want to answer the question, what is f of 3? So that's remember that usually we're looking at something like f of x, right? So just remember that 3 is going to be x here. We're going to plug in 3 where x is in our formula, right? So our formula says take x and square it. So we're going to take 3 and square it. So f of 3 is 3 squared. So we're taking 3 and squaring it, and then that's the same as 3 times 3, which is 9. So we've determined f of 3 is 9. And now we have to answer what x values correspond to y equals 4. Let's take a close look at the line y equals 4, this line. So this dotted line here is the line y equals 4. So we want to know what x values correspond to a y value of 4. And we can get it by doing this. Note, we essentially draw a horizontal line, y equals 4, and then we see where that crosses the graph. And we see it crosses here and here. So then to figure out what x coordinate that is, we can see that this is an x coordinate of -2, and this is an x coordinate of 2. Right? So this means the answer would be x equals 2 and x equals -2. Both of those values, right, if you take 2 and you square it, if you take 2 times 2, you do get 4. If you take -2 and you square it, -2 times -2 gives you positive 4, right? Because 2 negatives make a positive, so you still get 4 either way. So that's why there's 2 x values that correspond to a y value of 4 here, and they're here. So that's the end of this video. Please drop any questions that you have in the comments, and in the next video we'll talk about the vertical line test, we'll talk about piecewise functions, and then that should wrap up the section. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next video.